My name is Jonathan, and today I want to share with you something that completely changed my life. I wasn't born into wealth, nor did I grow up with any special advantages. I was raised in a small town in America, in a family that worked hard and believed in the traditional formula for success. Study hard, get good grades, go to college, find a stable job, and keep your head down. For years, I followed that script without questioning it, because that's what everyone around me did. I graduated, found a decent job, paid my bills, and lived the same routine day after day. On the surface, it looked like I was doing fine, but inside, I felt like something was missing. The more I tried to keep up with the expectations of society, the more trapped I felt. I had debt that seemed impossible to pay off, a schedule that left me exhausted, and a nagging emptiness that whispered, "Is this really all there is?" I worked harder, thinking that maybe I just hadn't pushed myself enough. But no matter how many hours I poured into my job, freedom and happiness seemed further and further away. I watched as years passed, and I realized I was living the exact same life as 99% of people around me. Safe, predictable, and painfully unremarkable. Deep down, I knew something was wrong. I wasn't living, I was surviving. And the harder I tried to play by the rules everyone else followed, the more I realized those rules were broken. I did everything I was told to do. I studied hard in high school, got into a decent college, and even though I couldn't afford tuition outright, I signed the loan papers with a smile because that's what everyone said was an investment in the future. 4 years later, I walked across the graduation stage with a piece of paper in my hand and tens of thousands of dollars in debt on my back. Still, I believed the promise that if I worked hard, the system would reward me. So I stepped into the world, eager, hungry, and naive enough to think I was on the right path. My first job was nothing glamorous. It was long hours in a gray cubicle, answering to a manager who seemed as trapped as I was. But I told myself it was just the beginning. I kept pushing through the fatigue, convincing myself that climbing the corporate ladder was the way out. I worked late nights, skipped family gatherings, traded weekends for overtime, and believed that sacrificing my present was the price for a brighter future. But the reality was cruel. My paycheck barely covered rent, student loans, and basic expenses. By the end of each month, I had nothing left to show for all those hours. Every morning, I sat in traffic with thousands of others, staring at brake lights, sipping lukewarm coffee, and pretending this was normal. I watched colleagues who had been there for 20 years, still grinding, still waiting for promotions that never came, still living paycheck to paycheck. Some of them had given everything to the company, only to be laid off in their 50s when they were too old to start over. That sight terrified me more than anything else. Was that my future? To work, obey, and hope the system would take care of me, only to be discarded when I was no longer useful? Then came the breaking point. One Friday afternoon, our manager walked into the office and announced a round of layoffs. I watched as one of my closest colleagues, someone who had been with the company for over a decade, was escorted out with a cardboard box of his belongings. He had done everything right, showed up early, worked late, never complained, and just like that, he was gone. No security, no safety net, just another casualty of the system we were all told to trust. That night, I went home and stared at my ceiling for hours, realizing, with a sinking feeling, that hard work alone was not the answer. The game was rigged, and I was playing on the losing side. It hit me with brutal clarity. If I kept living like the 99%, I would end up like the 99% burned out, broke, and bitter. And that was the moment I knew I had to find another way. Not long after that night when I couldn't sleep, questioning everything I had been taught, something happened that altered the course of my life. I was sitting in a small coffee shop downtown, drained from another meaningless day at work, when an older man struck up a conversation with me. He had an energy about him, calm but powerful, the kind of presence that makes you lean in without even realizing it. He asked me simple questions about my job, my goals, my dreams, and for the first time in a long while, I answered honestly. I didn't know what I was chasing anymore. I was tired of running in circles. He smiled and told me something that landed like a thunderclap in my mind. If you want to live like the 1%, you must do what the 99% refuse to do. It was such a simple sentence, but it shook me to the core. I had spent my whole life imitating the majority, believing safety was in numbers, when in fact, safety was just another word for mediocrity. That night, I went home and replayed his words over and over in my head. What were the 99% not willing to do? And more importantly, did I have the courage to be different? The next weeks were filled with restless energy. I started devouring books I had never touched before, on business, investing, mindset, personal growth. I listened to podcasts while driving. I scribbled notes late into the night, and for the first time in years, I felt alive. Knowledge began to reshape my worldview. I realized the people I admired didn't follow the herd. They took risks, they built things, they failed, and got back up again. So I made a decision that terrified me. I would step into the unknown. I poured what little savings I had into starting a small side business. I had no experience, no connections, just determination, and the echo of that one sentence in my mind. In the beginning, everything went wrong. I lost money. I made rookie mistakes. Friends shook their heads and told me I was wasting my time. My family worried that I was throwing away the stability I had worked so hard to build. And some nights, alone in my tiny apartment, I wondered if they were right. The failures stung more than I expected. I remember one deal in particular. I thought it would be my breakthrough, but it collapsed at the last minute, leaving me with nothing but empty pockets and bruised confidence. That night, I sat in the dark, staring at the numbers in my bank account, and the weight of fear pressed against my chest. Maybe I wasn't cut out for this. Maybe I should just go back, beg for a normal job, and bury this crazy dream. But then I remembered that man's words. If I quit now, I would slip back into the comfort of the 99% safe, predictable, and empty. If I pushed forward, I might fail again, but at least I would be failing on my own terms, chasing a life worth living. That thought lit a small fire inside me, fragile but real. And in that moment, I chose to keep going, no matter how much it hurt, no matter how alone it felt. Because deep down, I knew the road less traveled was the only road that could ever lead to freedom. The moment I stepped away from the path that everyone else followed, I felt the full weight of resistance pressing down on me. Friends who once supported me started to distance themselves. Family members looked at me with disappointment in their eyes. Every holiday gathering seemed to echo the same words. Why don't you just get a normal job? Why do you insist on chasing something so risky? I didn't have the answers. All I had was a vision, a fragile, unproven belief that life could be more than just working, paying bills, and waiting for retirement. But the doubt was real. Many nights, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, questioning if I had made the biggest mistake of my life. Was I being foolish? Was I throwing away the security that everyone else was desperately clinging to? And yet, something inside of me whispered, "Keep going." That voice was quiet, almost drowned out by fear, but it was there. Then, Amidst the storm came small victories. They weren't earth-shattering, but they mattered. A client finally said yes to working with me after 100 rejections. A project that seemed destined to fail unexpectedly turned profitable. One investor, who believed in my determination more than my credentials, agreed to give me a chance. Those moments lit a spark inside me. I realized something powerful. Failure doesn't destroy you. Fear of failure does. Every rejection, every sleepless night, every mistake was shaping me into someone tougher, sharper, and more resilient than I had ever been when I was safe. I started to understand that struggle wasn't a punishment, it was training. It was the fire that burns away weakness and prepares you for strength. The laughter of my doubters no longer cut me as deeply, because I knew that one day, the same people who mocked me would ask how I did it. And so, with every small win, I built momentum. I was still far from success, but I had crossed a line that most never dared to approach. I had tasted the courage of stepping outside the 99%. And once you experience that kind of freedom, there's no going back. The difference between who I was and who I was becoming could be traced back to one simple choice: to do the things most people avoided. I started to study the habits of the 1%, and I realized they weren't magical. They weren't born with superpowers. They just made different choices every single day. I began waking up at 5 a.m. while the world was still asleep. That quiet time became sacred. I read books that stretched my mind. I wrote down ideas that challenged the way I saw the world. And I trained my body as fiercely as I trained my mind. While others wasted hours scrolling on social media or numbing themselves with endless parties, I was sharpening my edge, building skills that no one could take away from me. But it wasn't just about habits. It was about courage. I forced myself into rooms where I felt small, where I was surrounded by people far smarter, wealthier, and more experienced than me. At first, I was intimidated, but soon I understood that's exactly where I needed to be. Because growth never happens in comfort. It happens when you're the weakest one in the room, fighting to rise to the level of those around you. And then came the risks. Not reckless risks, but calculated ones. While 99% clung to safety, I learned to say no to the illusion of security. Instead of spending money on the newest car or the latest phone, I invested in mentors, in courses, in projects that scared me. Every dollar I put into learning and creating was a seed planted for a future most people would never dare to imagine. I picked up the phone and made cold calls that terrified me. I stood on stages, heart pounding, to speak in front of strangers. I wrote when no one was reading. I recorded videos when no one was watching. These were the things 99% of people avoided because they were uncomfortable, awkward, even painful. But I realized something vital. Discomfort was the price of admission to the life I wanted. Every day, I chose the harder road, the road less crowded. And with each choice, I stepped further away from the ordinary and closer to the extraordinary. Because the truth is this: the life you dream of will never come from doing what everyone else is doing. It comes from doing what almost no one dares to do. There's a moment in every journey when the tide finally turns. For me, it didn't happen overnight. It came after years of grinding, failing, learning, and refusing to quit. I still remember the day it all changed. I had poured everything I had into a project that, on the surface, looked like just another risk. I was exhausted, nearly broke, and many nights I asked myself if I had been a fool for walking away from the safety of the 99%. But this time, something clicked. That project didn't just work, it exploded. Clients I had been chasing for years suddenly came knocking. The small wins I had collected through persistence snowballed into something massive. My income skyrocketed, but more importantly, I had bought myself something money could never truly measure: freedom. For the first time, I wasn't trading hours for dollars. I wasn't chained to someone else's clock, or begging for vacation days. I could choose where I wanted to live, who I wanted to work with, and how I wanted to spend my time. I had stepped into the life I once thought was reserved only for the lucky or the gifted. And then came the sweetest twist: of all the very people who had mocked me, who had told me to just be normal, started reaching out for advice. Old friends asked me how I did it. Family members who once doubted, now introduced me to others as the one who made it. The irony wasn't lost on me. The difference between me and them wasn't intelligence, wasn't privilege, wasn't luck. It was simply the willingness to do what 99% refused to do. But the transformation went deeper than wealth or status. My mind had changed. I realized that success was never about the money. It was about freedom, growth, and the ability to serve others. I was no longer chasing validation from the outside world. I was building, creating, and giving, because that's what living in the 1% is truly about: contribution. And that's the ultimate breakthrough. When you stop playing by the script of the masses, you gain not just financial independence, but also mental and spiritual independence. You see the world differently. You realize most limits were illusions. You recognize that the price of comfort is mediocrity, but the reward for discomfort is transformation. My story proves one undeniable truth. If you want to live like the 1%, you must do what the 99% are not willing to do. I grew up like everyone else, followed the script society handed me, and ended up trapped in the same cycle of debt, pressure, and unfulfilled dreams. But the moment I chose to walk away from the crowd, to embrace discomfort, to take risks, and to chase growth instead of safety, that was the moment my life began to change. The path wasn't easy. I stumbled. I failed. I was laughed at. And I spent nights questioning whether I had lost my mind. But each scar became a lesson. And each lesson pushed me closer to the life I once thought was impossible. Today, I live with freedom, purpose, and clarity, not because I was smarter, luckier, or richer than anyone else, but because I dared to do what most people avoided. So here is my message to you. Don't settle for the easy path. Don't hide behind the comfort of the crowd. Don't waste your one life living like 99% of people who never get to taste true freedom. Choose the road that scares you, that challenges you, that forces you to grow, because it's only on that road that transformation happens. The world doesn't reward average, it rewards the bold. And the truth is, you already know what the 99% are doing. It's all around you. If you want a different life, you must be different. So ask yourself right now, will you follow the script, or will you dare to break it? The choice is yours, and the time is now.